This is your home for St. Cloud State hockey, keeping you up to date on the NCHC.
One-timer, come in, they score! Ripped in! A bomb from Pervix!
Women's WCHA.
So Dana Rasmussen fires and she scores! Dana Rasmussen for the Huskies alongside
The National Hockey League.
Kaprizov in for a chance to win it! He scores! Kirill, the thrill is for real! Welcome to the NHL, a game winner!
And everything from the state of hockey.
St. Cloud Cathedral is now 42.6 seconds away from wrapping up the school's first ever title.
Welcome to the Huskies Warming House Podcast Den.
And welcome into episode number 74 here of the Huskies Warming House podcast. I'm Noah Grant, joined alongside my co-host Nick Maxon just after 9 o'clock here on this Sunday morning in the middle of August. And we've got a bit of a more interesting show for you, a little more... it's not lighthearted. Let's put it that way. It's straight to the facts with a lot of issues surrounding the hockey community and the Minnesota community as well. And we're going to touch on those topics as we kind of move through the show a little bit on the Mac Motzko situation, some updates on those. Then the extra ice session is going to talk a lot about the Chicago Blackhawks and where their franchise and future lies in that organization. We've got a very quick Huskies Illustrated Weekly Roundup to touch on, as well as some quick women's hockey news to mention as well. And without further ado, we're going to get started with Center Ice View News and Notes.
Center Ice View News and Notes. Center Ice View provides you with the best coverage of St. Cloud State Huskies hockey, from game notes, recaps, photos, and more. Go to centericeview.com.
As we get into the Huskies Illustrated Weekly Roundup this week, some player personnel news around the National Hockey League, some signings, as well as some injury updates. In fact, we'll start with up in Toronto. The former Rocket Richard winner, Austin Matthews, undergoing wrist surgery, was dealing with some nagging issues all last season. Finally decided, you know what, I'm going to get this cleaned up before opening of training camp, and still put up 41 goals. He's out 6 weeks, so going to be a little bit tight as far as the opening night here goes for the National Hockey League, but set to be pretty close to being ready for the 23-year-old sniper. Again, Austin Matthews undergoing some surgery. Meanwhile, Jumbo Joe, the ageless wonder, beard man, whatever you want to call him, getting a 1-year deal with the Florida Panthers. This kind of surprised me a little bit there, Noah, because again, you know, for Jumbo Joe, I think, you know, he's definitely, you know, well past his prime, but no question, he's trying to, I would think, find a team and an opportunity to win a Stanley Cup. And in fact, he's choosing South Florida and the Panthers there. Also the Panthers, by the way, Sam Reithert did finally sign his extension with the Panthers after being traded from the Buffalo Sabres. 3 years, $19.5 million in that package. And then some other notable signings along the league. New York, up to their young goaltender, Igor Shesterkin. He returns for a contract worth just over $5.5 million per season. Philadelphia, if they suck, you know, whose fault is it and why is it Carter Hart? They did nab him for an extension, 3 years at $4 million per season. Defenseman Neil Pionk with Winnipeg, it's a 4-year, $23.5 million package there from the Jets. And the Red Wings, after being acquired, Jacob Vrana does get an extension there, 3 years at $5.25 million per season. So some pretty good signings there, and a lot of money being thrown around, Noah, especially with the salary cap again being flat. You know, we've seen a lot of big money deals still being tossed up by the ownership and Wells organization. So, and then there's some notable news here too. Other players receiving extensions go to Vancouver's Jason Dickinson, Winnipeg's Andrew Kopp, Tampa Bay's Ross Colton. He had the Stanley Cup game winner in Game 5. They're down in Tampa. Washington's Ilya Samsonov, and then Anaheim's Maxime Comtois also signed extensions with their respective clubs.
I think the reason everyone likes to blame Carter Hart is because they should look at Chuck Fletcher. He's given away those draft picks and assets like candy. I don't know.
It's not been good, but again, Philadelphia fans ask, a couple of other former goaltenders. They're not very, they're pretty harsh in their goaltenders. So I think no matter who you put in between the pipes here in Philadelphia, the fans either you love them or you hate them.
Hey, I just want you to know it's only game. You don't have to be mad. Anyway, great Ilya Bryzgalov reference there. Great league personality. Not so much great in the save percentage when he was a Philadelphia Flyer, but nonetheless, he got his payday, and that's what matters. And so did Carter Hart. Anyway, moving to league-wide news, the National Hockey League Players Association did warn yesterday on Saturday that unvaccinated players could lose pay. The Players Union noted that, quote, unvaccinated individuals may face stiff penalties if they contract COVID-19 during the next season, cautioning that teams could have the power to withhold paychecks while an unvaccinated player is out due to the virus, or if he can't play because of local regulations. So kind of tying in that piece as well. It was also noted that unvaccinated players would not be exempt to enter Canada due to their status in the National Hockey League. They wouldn't make the road trip, and they would have their pay withheld if they couldn't make a road trip into Canada. On Friday, a memo was also sent out that any team staff in contact with players must be vaccinated as well. NHL Deputy Commissioner Bill Daly also did mention that over 85% of players are already vaccinated. That's compared to 90% in both the NFL and the NBA, and 99% in the WNBA have gotten the vaccine. So a little bit of a interesting divide there between what is essentially a business and their assets and employees within. So
it makes sense though, Noah, as we try to turn this corner with the COVID-19 virus, and more specifically the Delta variant that has now been wreaking havoc in certain parts of this nation. There's no question the National Hockey League knows that the last year's model was a one-time off model, that the league is not going to be in a position to spend the money or the resources to have bubbles to protect players. And at the end of the day, they're putting the onus now on the players to say, hey, you know what? If this is the route you want to take and you cause yourself to be out, you're going to have your pay withheld. I think, it's a very strong, very, stern stance to take from the league. But again, the league lost over $3 billion last season alone. And the players owe the owners actually quite a bit of money. And, with the flat cap and, HRR or hockey related revenue, in fact, same reporter, Frank Saravelli, actually up in Canada, had kind of reported that even if things, kind of go positive for the league, that escrow balance though to the owners could take 5 to 7 years to pay off. And so the league is not taking any chances. And I can't blame the league, because they know that if, they have games that are canceled, the games are delayed and all that stuff, they're losing revenue. And mind you, most of that revenue that they lost from last year is ticket sales. And they need to have those games played. So I understand it. I think it's a good move for the league. And, you hope the players get on board. 85% is a good number, but there's still 15% of the players that need to come on board as well.
Yeah, there's also, I read a report too, I think it was the MTS Center up in Winnipeg. They were one of the first ones in Canada to require proof of vaccination before you go to the games. They're at full capacity, but you have to be vaccinated in order to go to the games too. And again, I know there's going to be people that aren't unhappy with it, or aren't happy with it, I should say. But I guess when you look from the league standpoint, and even these local venues, I think the MTS Center, I think it's fair to say that sort of policy probably won't be held to just hockey. It might be held to concerts or things like that, should they occur as well too. You got to understand it from a business standpoint. They don't want to have anything else shut down, because like you mentioned, last season, if the NHL was a business that did not have fans, if they were just a Fortune 500 company, they wouldn't be working last year, because it was from a financial and logistical standpoint, it made no sense for the league to actually play last year. So, you can understand the position. And like you said, hopefully players, do what they have to do to play. And hopefully this season goes off without a hitch.
And you're hoping so, right? So, but wrapping up the week's topic of news, kind of a sad story, actually two sad stories. Ottawa, 31-year-old netminder Anders Nielsen is retiring due to post-concussion symptoms. The Swede last appeared in an NHL game in the 2019-20 season, posting a .907 save percentage in 161 NHL contests. He played for 6 NHL squads. He captured a gold medal for Sweden in the 2018 World Championships. certainly wish Anders Nielsen the best of luck. He had a couple of collisions there in his career. Mm-hmm. And, for folks wondering, how can a goaltender suffer from post-concussion systems? Well, yeah, sometimes they're bowled over, whether it's in the net or maybe they're out playing the puck. And Anders Nielsen, unfortunately for him, with those post-symptoms, having to retire. So we wish him the best of luck in his future endeavors outside of the hockey rink. But let's go back to the Chicago Blackhawks. Tony Esposito, the absolute famous Hall of Famer goaltender, did pass away at the age of 78 after a battle with pancreatic cancer. 15 of his 16 seasons in his career were played in a Chicago Blackhawks uniform. He does remain the franchise's all-time leader in shutouts with 74 and career wins with 418. His number 35 was retired quite a while ago, 1988, to go along with 3 Vezina Trophy, to go to his name. Also captured a Stanley Cup in 1969 with the Montreal Canadiens. And that was the only time that he was in another uniform in his career. So, he was their backup goaltender at that time. Chicago then claimed him on waivers, and his meteoric rise began, earning the Calder Trophy as a top rookie. Well, you would be the top rookie goaltender too at that stage, right? So in 1970,
had 15 shutouts that year. How about that one?
Unbelievable, right? Obviously, a very fierce, competitive guy. Tony O's, as he was known throughout the hockey world, had a career record of 423, 306, and 151, and ranks 10th in NHL history as in goaltending statistics. So, our thoughts and our go up to the Chicago Blackhawks and obviously the family of Tony Esposito.
And welcome in once again to episode number 74 here. I'm Noah Grant, like I had mentioned, joined alongside my co-host and Nick Maxon. Nick, it's a great day in the Midwest, I guess. I don't know. It's sunny here. It looks like it's sunny behind you, but last time I said that it was raining. So, who really knows? How is your Sunday going? I know you and I think we both woke up a bit on the groggy side, but I actually have 2 days off after today, which is very, very rare because school starts the week after. So I'm a little bit excited to get to my vacation, and you're the one holding it up. I'm totally kidding. You're like you scheduled this time, not me. So, but yeah, how is your Sunday morning and your week going?
Well, man, it's funny you mentioned school because a week from tomorrow for those around the St. Cloud, campus, and I think some other Minnesota State schools, it's fall semester again. That's unbelievable to think that we're already there. It's gone super quick. It's almost like you're in shock, at this point. And I was driving yesterday, Noah, a little bit back from work. And, when you can definitely tell things have changed when you sit at the intersection, you look at the time and you realize, wait, it doesn't look like it's 4. It kind of looks like it's 6 o'clock now. The shadows are longer. You can just tell, right? There's just some subtleties that make us up here in the Midwest, especially even in your neck of the woods, that things are changing, right? And that means, cooler temperatures are on the way as well. And I'm not even going to talk about the other stuff. I don't even want to think about it. Don't say it or else, you mean the
little sprinkly stuff that comes from the sky?
Yeah, that stuff. So, but then again, that means also we're closer to NCHC and St. Cloud hockey too, in their, bid to get back to a national championship game. And, that's exciting too. But again, their season kicking off early October, I believe the 2nd and the 3rd, again, against a home and home with St. Thomas. So it's just insane that, you think, oh, we're in the middle of July. It feels like not that long ago, it was 4th of July. And, I was up at the cabin and, here we are middle of August and things are trending as well. Time to get the backpack ready. You got to dust it off again.
Yeah, I can totally see that because I'm going to be in the same boat in the next week as well, too, getting ready. We've got our first 2 weeks. We're going to do IVs and IV placement and learn that quickly because we got clinicals 2 weeks after that. And we're going to be on the floor for the entire semester. So it's going to move fast, going to move quickly. Obviously, nursing school books cost a fortune and a half. Now, say what you will about college books in general, but when it comes to medical majors, they just love to throw the extra price tag or the extra manual that you need in there. And it's just, but yeah, the other thing that I was going to mention too is the fact that not only are we moving into St. Cloud hockey, I'm really excited because one, I think you and I are going to have a better handle on how to go through a season and a season that has a little bit more normalcy to the coverage as well, hopefully too. But on top of that, Nick, we potentially might hit a milestone this episode in terms of the audio only podcast. We've been over this number in terms of overall statistics, but in terms of people who have just listened to the audio only version of the podcast, If the trend continues and the numbers continue the way that we have seen, this episode might be the one that gets us to 10,000 audio listens in the history of the show. So kind of exciting. We are just under that number. So tell your friends, tell your family. I guess from the back end standpoint, things have been looking good this summer. We appreciate all of our listeners and the work that they do in giving us the time of day to listen to our show and share it with family and friends as well, too. Pretty exciting on that note, wouldn't you say, Nick?
That's 10,000 poor souls' ears that I feel like we've wrecked. But at the end of it, no, again, we always have appreciated and the support from everybody that's out there. Huskies fans, Duluth fans, Fighting Hawks fans, if they even care to listen. I don't know. Maybe they do. But yeah, anybody that's out there, of course, support means a lot to us. So
yeah, and when we started the show, and we love our guests too, although we don't have a guest schedule as of yet for this week too. This summer has just flown by, and with the busy schedules that people have had and things, it's just been kind of a crazy week crazy time for scheduling. I did have a good conversation with Brett Larson. Brett had mentioned that he'll be on the show at some point, probably about a week or two before they play St. Thomas. So pretty close to the start of the season. And he was really excited about it. It'll be his 5th time on the show, if I'm not mistaken. So I don't know why he likes us so much. Someone must be paying him money or something, but it's not us because we don't have any hashtag Caleb Peabody. But, speaking of money and things that cost money, Nick, before we get into our trivia question, I suppose I could inform the listeners as to my Monday night that happened this week. For those of you watching the YouTube page, you're going to notice that I do have a full set of teeth in my mouth. But as Nick Maxon and those who want to go to Twitter at SCSU Hockey 91 can attest to, I did not have my teeth for the entire week. I got them knocked out playing hockey, cutting through the middle of the ice. It actually happened right early in the ice session. I was picking up a puck on the far wall with speed, and the entire group of defenders was coming back across the grain, and I decided to cut back towards the middle. It's actually I thought it was a really nice move. And next thing I knew, I got hit in the face. And it was one of those, like when things happen to you in life and you just know, like right away, something was different about whatever it was that just happened. I mean, I was like sliding on my knees from the speed, and I knew right away. I was like, yeah, something's wrong here. And then of course, put my tongue up to my teeth and was missing teeth and started leaking all over the ice and stuff. So, but I was able to get in. That happened at 7:00 at night. I was able to get in at 8:00 the next morning. My dentist was able to get me in and get me new teeth so I could go back to work. Exciting, right? But
so quite literally, you were spitting chiclets.
Yeah, and it's so true. And for those who also want to know, the other two, so it's this tooth that got knocked out. The other tooth on my right side is also fake. I got that one knocked out playing hockey too. I was on the outdoor rink, and I got, bless you. And I was following somebody to the corner on the outdoor rink when I was a kid. Bless you again, Mr. Max. And holy smokes.
I must be allergic to your story or something like that. I have no idea.
I'm not a very good storyteller. And if I do tell a story, I'll find a way to say the word interesting at least once. But anyway, yeah, the other time it happened, we were kids, and someone fell down in front of me on the outdoor rink, and their foot came up and actually kicked me in the face. I was actually pretty lucky I didn't get my face cut. So as you can see, my lip has a little bit of a scar on there right now because my teeth did go through my lip. But we're here. We're happy. We're doing a podcast. We're enjoying life. But just be careful out there, kiddos. Apparently the rink staff found the other half of my tooth. I never found it. So this is fake.
Gonna give it to you in like a little box or something like that as a memoir,
For those of you who are parents of kids, or if you are a kid playing hockey, just know that if you do knock your teeth out, my first one, it's finally fully crowned and fake, but at the time they reattached it. If you ever do find the entirety of your tooth, put it in milk. That's actually what you should put it in before you bring it to the dentist, because that will keep the pulp and everything inside the teeth healthy enough, potentially if you're going to the dentist the next day, and they could potentially reattach it, especially if you have no nerve endings in there. Both of mine, I've had the nerves exposed, and it's not fun. But yeah, put it in milk. So there's the Huskies Warming House podcast tip for the day.
Surgery with Dr. Grant. Anyway, so
yeah. Speaking of things that were surgical or far from, we're going to jump into our trivia question here, Nick. The trivia question did read, as we move into week 14 of 25 of season 2 of trivia. Now, the question did read: the last NHL seasons are the only back-to-back seasons in which a full NHL schedule is not played, which of course at this point, as we know, is 82 games per season. What 2 NHL seasons in history played more than 82 games, and what prompted the change to today's 82? Nick, do you have any idea on this one?
92 and 93, right?
93 and 94. Yeah.
And the changes where they had those 2 neutral site games that every team played a year that they were like, this is dumb. Let's just get rid of these. So
yeah. So as Robert Poser, who won for the first time in season 2 trivia, did note, there was a 2-year CBA in 1992, 93, and 93, 94. They had 84 games during the season. So then following that 94 lockout and only 48 games, they eliminated those 2 neutral site contests played by each team during the season. And we've been at 82 games ever since until the last couple of seasons. So kind of an interesting little history of the league. And I thought it was intriguing, even with World War II, as I was going through, there is consistency in the seasons. Like, I mean, yes, there's changes where we've gone from 50 games to 70 games and 74 and things like that, but it's always been a linear, very consistent change. And then you look at last year and the year before, and it's going to be a little blip, a little anomaly in the schedule for a long time. Seeing how that works. So, Nick, do you have anything else to add on that one? Probably not. No. Okay. Speaking of scheduling, we have the Women's World Hockey Championships getting ready to take place here in a couple of days, August 20th, from this time of recording. And we've got some St. Cloud State women's players that also did continue to make their national teams for the Women's Worlds. 2 more entries, I should say, for the Czech Republic. Klara Himlerova, a very good offensive dynamic player. She's going to be joining her respective team. And then former St. Cloud State women's player who just graduated, Laura Kluga, for Germany, made her national team as well, too. And then Hannah Bates, who just graduated, a defenseman from the St. Cloud State women's hockey team. She officially signed with the Connecticut Whale in the NWHL this past week too. Nick, maybe let's spend some time on this here kind of quickly here. Klara Himlerova and Laura Kluga, 2 players that are going to join in representing their national teams on the biggest stage, joining Janina Newland for Team Finland. What do both of these players, one still going to be in a St. Cloud State sweater and Klara Himlerova, and one that just moved on in Laura Kluga, what do they both bring to the table for their respective teams?
Kluga brings offensive firepower. She brings skating. She's actually one of the few players that, at least when I watched, consistently over the last couple of seasons, she plays everything with speed. She's always turning her feet. She's always looking up ice. She's always looking to make a play, and she's looking to shoot the puck too. So for Laura Kluga, she's going to bring that firepower, that tenacity, that offensive threat. And then for Himlerova, as we've said before, she is that playmaker. She's that person that's got great vision, great hockey IQ, looks for the right plays, is patient, maybe not necessarily, the shoot first mentality, but she's always looking to make a play. So they're going to be offensive threats in different ways for their respective teams, but always looking to add some of those apples or some of those Genos to their respective stat casts. So offensive people, that's what they do. So just a little bit different how they approach it.
Yeah, just very dynamic offensively. I mean, you nailed it right on the head. Klara Himlerova, also a really funny personality if you ever kind of talk to her in the locker room or behind the scenes, and just fun to be around, but a really good hockey player too. Someone who came in her freshman year, really infused a lot of life and a lot of potential for this St. Cloud group and her class moving forward. A very good incoming. In fact, historically the best, if I'm not mistaken, best freshman incoming class in St. Cloud State women's hockey history. Klara Himlerova's group, they're moving into their junior year. And then speaking of junior years, Laura Kluga, a good bounce back in return, to form in her senior year. She had that injury in the middle of her junior year that kept her out for most of the season as well too. So, seeing players be able to come back and replicate the success they had, going back to me getting hit in the face. I remember the next ice session, when I went back out, there were some things that I had to adjust to, just kind of feeling comfortable again with going around people, that were flying around next to me. You think it's not going to affect you, but then there are times, especially, when you're coming back from injury, that you tend to think about things a little bit more than you maybe thought about them previously until you get readjusted. And Laura Kluga's readjustment period was very small. Offensively, she's a very gifted player. I like that you mentioned it so well. She plays very good with speed, and that's the biggest thing. You want to play at the next level. You want to play on a national team. You want to be a better hockey player. For all you young players out there, you've got to be able to do whatever the heck you're doing at the level you're at right now, at the next level even quicker, because that's just how you have to be able to do things quicker. Think the game more quicker than anything related to your hands, your feet, to be honest with you. And then the physical part will come as well too. So we wish them the best of luck in the Women's World Championships, and hopefully Klara Himler comes back and has a great season again for the women's team as well. Nick, we're going to move into kind of the sadder topics of the day. We've got 2 of them, one in the main show, one in the extra ice. And we're going to start right now with the one close to home, the Mac Moscow situation. We had a great interview a couple weeks ago with Mick Hatton of the Rink Live. Go check that one out. That was a great interview about the Mac Moscow situation. But the driver 51-year-old James Blue of Orono. He was charged with 4 counts of criminal vehicular homicide, according to court documents filed in Hennepin County on Monday. Nick, we've kind of gone through the story a couple of times, turn rated at 40, 45, 50 miles an hour, going 99 miles an hour. The toxicology report was not great regarding this 51-year-old. What was your stance on this, as he obviously was alive and did turn himself in to the jailing process?
He actually did it twice, which is interesting. So he actually did it as soon as he was released from the hospital, which was, I think, 3 or 4 days after the initial accident. He walked right into Hennepin County Jail, and, they had not formally charged him with anything. And for folks who are wondering why someone would do that, this is all, at this point, this is a game. This is him playing the remorse card. There's no question that he was the one that drove. There's no question that he acted recklessly. This is not one of those court situations, and I'm putting in a lawyer hat right now. I'm not sure why, but anyway, but this is true, actually. There's no question he was the one that did it. There were, multiple witnesses to it. The accident happened less than a block away. And so by turning yourself in, even before you're charged, you're trying to convince the jury at some point that, you felt bad for it, that you want to cooperate. It could also be a situation too, where, and this happens too, where the opposing counsel calls and says, "Hey man, we know you did this. There's so many witnesses. You were picked up by ambulance. The toxicology is not going to come back good. The speed is there. And, let's just get this so everybody can move on." Right. And so that could be part of it. So mind you, there's 2 different counts of criminal vehicular homicide. If you read the documents there, there's the criminal vehicular homicide. And then the second one is 2 counts. I believe it's operating in, I think it's reckless in a reckless way, essentially. And that specifically focuses on the speed aspect of it. So, you have the alcohol, which the toxicology 0.175 was the toxicology reading. For those who know Minnesota law, 0.08 is considered drunk driving. So he was over twice the legal limit, according to the blood samples that were taken. So that it's angry. And on top of that, I should bring this in. For the first time, Bob Motzko spoke publicly. He did a sit down with the Star Tribune, a local Minneapolis newspaper. He was quoted by saying this was murder. That was his quote to the Star Tribune. He's not wrong. The homicide charge does back that up. With these, it's sad. And, I'm not quite sure that I remember the first court appearance when it's going to be scheduled, but just a terrible situation. Again, as the accident unfolded, there were certain signs pointing to what may have happened. We now have more proof of the speed. We now have proof if there was maybe some different things. And also all in that Star Tribune article too, I should mention that the hospital staff actually found what they called a powdery white substance, as well as marijuana gummies also on it as well. So I'm not quite sure if he was, had ingested any of that or what that white powdery substance was. But yeah, overall, not a great look for the 51-year-old who is probably, is not going to be sitting pretty here as we move forward in the judicial process.
Yeah, 100 miles an hour with marijuana, another type of controlled substance, like you had mentioned, country road. That said, a lot of people said it could easily fit murder in the 3rd degree, but we're going to find out. September 8th is that court date that's going to be set. It's just difficult. It's difficult to have to go through it again and talk through it. It kind of reminds me a little bit. I was thinking about what situation this, has any comparison to. It actually reminds me of the Danny Heatley situation back in 2003. And I think the charge, if I'm not mistaken, was similar. It was essentially, one of them was essentially, driving recklessly, under the conditions of the road and the conditions of you as a driver, essentially. But my question is this, and obviously I haven't read any reports about this, haven't heard any statements that James has made himself. And you talked about how the lawyering and the judicial process can be a game and kind of a step-by-step process as well. Do you think, and this is a difficult question to ask, do you think that James Blue, when he turned himself in, do you think that there is actually remorse in there? Or do you think it was an after the fact, I'm already screwed, I have to go through this process? Or do you think that, similar to when we talked about the Logan Mailloux situation, that there is some remorse to be had with this man, or not?
Good question. In fact, James actually can answer that for me. So when the Star Tribune article also came out, again with Bob Motzko and then the Schumann, the parents of the Schumann, again, Ella Motzko's boyfriend, who was also killed in the crash. He was quoted by the paramedic staff that, even before he was transported to the hospital, that he was said, "I'm guilty, I did it," that kind of thing. What I don't remember reading, and this is, I don't know if that means he said it or didn't. It sounds like there was remorse there. Now, granted, it could be a bit of both. To answer your question, it could be where there is actual remorse there. I mean, this with his actions, he has killed 2 young people, and again, you talk about. I think what a lot of folks reading the situation from afar, the immediate reaction is this was 100% preventable. It was a series of decisions that led to the last one, which that decision cost 2 lives and potentially his. I mean, you got to remember too, he's lucky to be alive himself. He was not in a seatbelt. He was ejected from the vehicle as it hit multiple trees. Again, he collided with trees going over close to 100 miles an hour.
Yeah.
The fact that he's alive is a miracle in itself, right?
The fact that he was actually inebriated as strongly as he was likely played a huge factor in, from a medical standpoint, depressing his organs and finding a way to keep him alive. Unfortunately. Well, I
don't know if you want to say unfortunately, just because, we never wish death by anybody, but, but I understand that's a lot of folks do feel that way. It's like, this is the gentleman who made poor decisions and he cost the lives of 2 young people. And, it's the, why is it fair that, he shouldn't be alive. It's an eye for an eye mentality, right? But you're right, from a strictly medical point, maybe some help there. And again, can't even imagine what that collision must have been like, for everybody in that situation. But let's go back to, the whole reason for the courts, right? No, and again, I'm no legal expert by any means. But again, when the case is pretty cut and clear, again, there's no question who did this. There's no question what happened. We've got the toxicology, we've got, the accident reconstruction team, that they had pulled vehicle data from the Bentley that, said that this was the speed, right before impact. That's pretty irrefutable for the most part. Of course, the defense attorney can, try to, put some doubt into those numbers. But, usually in these, cases, the counsel for would-be for Schumann and Motzko usually makes a call and says, hey, man, you can either fight this, which you can, or, I don't know how you would, but we all know this is you, so for everybody to move on with their lives, let's go through the process. Let's handle this, like adults, and let's just, move forward. Right. So it could be that, at least in my opinion, there was both at play there, because again, if you're trying to convince a jury, especially because at this point, the play on this is, can I get a lesser sentence? That's the play. That is, by his defense team, saying that, he turned himself in before he's even charged. He was cooperative through the entire investigation, that kind of thing. At the accident scene, he said he was sorry, that he owned it, that he was remorseful. The sad part of all this, is that it doesn't change the 2 lives that have unfortunately ended. That's the big point is, no matter how remorseful you are, the thing that the prosecution will hit home is just, again, how preventable this was.
Yeah, extremely preventable. And I thank you for correcting me that. Yeah, obviously I don't wish anybody dead in that comment. So I want to make sure sometimes when you're talking through and you're ending up a sentence, sometimes you just say things. And I'm glad you clarified that for me, because you know how I feel. You know me well enough to know that I don't wish anybody. I'm going to nursing school. So put right. 2 and 2 together on that one. But the other piece of this too, and I always, in these situations, I try my best to put myself in everybody's shoes, including James's shoes. And when we talked about how the remorse might be genuine, or it also might be a little bit of posturing as well too, I also think about it this way, Nick, not incriminating yourself in any way, but have you ever accidentally ran a red light before when you're driving? I think we all have. I guess I have. Or something of that nature. And my point to that is essentially, we've all done things that were illegal. In fact, I think I read an article a couple of years ago that said that we actually do probably about 7 or 8 illegal things, technically, like almost every day. things that are illegal by the standards in which we have. But how many times do you walk up to somebody, like if you accidentally run a red light and you walk up to the courthouse and you say, hey, I ran a red light today at this intersection right here. You don't, right? Because your actions were not something that ended horrifically, thankfully.
Can I jump in and clarify one thing too? It's one thing to accidentally run a red light because you weren't paying attention or whatever it is. It's another thing to purposely run a red light broadside of vehicle.
Right. But that's not my point though. My point being, we do actions all the time that don't end horrifically or don't warrant the need for further judicial intervention, if you will. So I think back to the other coverage for some of these difficult situations that we've had. It might be a little bit of posturing, but at the same time, I guess I find a very, 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 very small amount of comfort in the fact that posturing or not, it's at least on display. And it's at least on display in the sense that he is here. He's part of that process. He knows what's going to happen. He's, for lack of a better term, even though he wasn't accountable that night, he is accountable right now in this moment. He is going through that process. And he's going to have to live with this for the rest of his life. We all know that. And I always try to find some sort of light at the end of the tunnel. And I guess that's my little nugget, is the fact that, I do wonder how genuine that remorse is. Maybe it is 100% fully genuine and he feels totally awful and wishes he would have never made such a stupid, reckless and irresponsible decision. But I just want to throw that out there too, where we think about, I guess it's similar to the Logan Mailloux situation, which we had more information on that one too, that makes him a little less defensible in that thing as well too. But we didn't really touch on that, and I don't know that we will. But I guess again, it goes back to the piece. It's like, is there time? Hopefully heals a little bit, but is there anything that you can take from James's actions up to this point that finds you a little bit of closure, a little bit of solace, a little bit of something as we move forward? Because at some point we're all trying to move forward from this. What is the piece from this that you hopefully take from this that helps you or maybe others move forward from this situation?
Well, again, when anybody is, alleged is the proper word, right? Mm-hmm. Alleged until convicted, right? That they've done something this horrendous. There's two ways you can go about it. You can run from it, or you can own it. And if there's one thing that he has done, is he has faced, the brass. He has, cooperated with the investigation. He hasn't, tried to run away. He hasn't tried to deny anything. And again, I think the one big thing that we haven't heard, and probably, again, smart from him, honestly, is that he hasn't really spoken publicly about it. I don't think he will until it goes to court. I don't think we will hear anything that he says until that point. And that's smart legal counsel for those who know that. But again, you talk about sometimes people will say actions speak louder than words. And in this situation, I think actions, I don't think they speak louder, but they do speak pretty, with great volume that, he's at least, and owning the mistake. At least that's what the perception is, that he is cooperating. And he is, like I said, he turned himself in once before he got charged. Once he was formally charged, he turned himself back in. So, he's not shying away from it, which tells me, again, that he's, you would hope there would be some remorse there, but he's not shying away from the process. And he's trying to make a really bad and horrendous situation, part of which cannot be reversed, but ability to again move forward. So I think there's some solace in that, because you do get folks that whether it's caught on camera or whatnot, they'll deny it till they're blue in the face. That's just some people are like that, and that's their right to do so. And it does rub people the wrong way. In this case, at least from what we've seen so far, he is going right with the investigation. He's doing everything that's asked of him, and for everybody that's involved, I think at least this is still in the very early stages. That's about as much as you can hope for.
Yeah. And I guess the other piece of this too is we're going to find out from September 8th onward, especially when we get a chance to formally hear him speak at some point. We're going to find out if his remorse does appear to be genuine, but everybody's going to come to their own conclusions on that as well too. So obviously a very difficult situation. We wish everybody involved. We wish James Blue, we wish his family involved in this. It's horrible for them on that side of that piece too. Obviously we wish the families involved, Mac Motzko, Bob Motzko, the Schuneman family, as you had mentioned as well too, and everybody involved. Just a really difficult situation, and something hopefully that besides the end of this trial, we hopefully don't have to cover too much more.
Right. And Noah, as going back to McHatton's interview, the one thing we haven't really gotten clarity is, if it does Coach Motzko still want to coach? We haven't really heard one way or the other. So, you can only assume at this point he's still coaching. But again, there hasn't been any, at least it wasn't addressed in the Star Tribune article that I read. I don't think that, that was at least talked on record per se. You got to wonder, just as McHatton had alleged, what's going through his mind. You mentioned, was it September was the first court appearance for James Blue? If I heard you right? Yeah,
September 8th. And let's think that probably about a month from now, about a week after that is probably when teams really start to ramp it up as far as like coaches are allowed to be on the ice and get things going. Because like for the St. Cloud schedule, they're playing October, whatever it is, first and second and third. Yeah. So.
Yeah, well, so we'll see, and you kind of wonder if, a court appearance, there's so innocent in nature, but sometimes the formality of it, just having to, even for Bob and the Schunemans, having to face, as you mentioned it multiple times, had to relive this head on, in a formal setting like that, you just never know how someone may react to that. So as you mentioned, we wish both the Motzkos and the Schunemans and everybody involved, just, the best that they can moving forward with this. And we'll certainly keep everybody on the podcast as updated as anything new comes about, or if, as the things move along in the judicial proceedings, we'll obviously update the story as it continues to go forward.
Yeah, I don't know 6 months ago that I would have ever said this covering St. Cloud State hockey, but I really hope we see Bob Motzko back in a Minnesota uniform behind a Minnesota bench again, because I think that would be awesome for not only him, but all of us, because he is a talented coach and he loves what he does and does a very good job at what he does. And obviously, whether we want to give him a hard time or not, does mean a lot to the St. Cloud community. And I think vice versa as well, too. But that will do it for the main portion of the show here for episode number 74. We're going to move into our extra ice session. If you love that somber discussion, you're going to get another one here. We're going to talk about the Chicago Blackhawks and their allegations and things of that and their investigation as well, too. And welcome into the extra ice session for episode number 74. For the third time here, I am Noah Grant. My co-host over there, brightly bathed in the computer spotlight in which he sits, is Nick Maxon. Ooh, how'd you like that? Would you call that a compliment? Can we chalk that up as one? Should I add it to the list? I think there's only like 3 of them on there. So
I have no idea what to think anymore. So.
Well, a lot of people don't know what to think of, not only myself, but also the Chicago Blackhawks situation and their allegations surrounding what is going on there. We've got some information from 25 season ticket holders that were kind of polled on the matter, and some more information kind of through podcasts. Seems like podcasts between the Jack Eichel situation and now this situation is where we're getting the bulk of our information from. So, hey, podcasts aren't all bad. Ours is, but other ones aren't. So with that being said, Nick, are you comfortable kind of walking people through what is going on up to this point through the Chicago Blackhawks organization and kind of where we're at?
Absolutely. So for those who, haven't heard, the Blackhawks are under what seems to be an internal investigation. A former player who was on the 2010 Stanley Cup winning team had alleged that former you could say coach or whatnot. Yeah. Brad
video
Aldrich,
coach.
He was a video coach, had sexually assaulted a player. And here's where it gets interesting. So long story short, we're going to get into a lot of the details here as we go forward, but just to kind of set people up, there was multiple folks, at least from what we know, and the gentleman who's been spearheading the reporting this has been by a gentleman named Rick Westhead. He's a TSN reporter. He's kind of TSN's version of Katie Strang. Just even he said of the Steve Dangle podcast, it's like, me as a journalist, I covered news and it didn't really satisfy me. He goes, it's not that I go up to cover these things, that I like to, because these situations are horrible, because I do find that I get, some life, to try to bring these sorts of things that people are trying to cover up. And that's the big allegations at Chicago. There are multiple people, including Stan Bowman's names been thrown around, that said that they were presented with what happened, had recommended to get the proper authorities involved, that it was shut down, or shot down, I should say. And then Aldrich, shortly thereafter this, was given a letter of recommendation to go, I believe, up to Miami University. And within 4 months of him being the director of hockey operations, he left his post again with similar allegations starting from there. And then went to I think it's Houghton, Michigan, I believe, to a high school up there where John Doe number 2, so another sexual assault victim, was reported that he did the same thing. So there's two sides of this. There's the immediate action with Chicago, and then what's supposed to be the cover up. And then the bigger side of it is the organization gave him what's being reported. And again, this is all, not being confirmed or anything like that, but this is the reporting coming up that we know of right now, that this positive letter of recommendation by the team allowed them to be put in a position, especially with Miami University, to allow similar actions to take place. So that's kind of where this stems from, is that, internally, what's being reported is the Blackhawks knew the situation. Multiple people, including the general manager. There's, in fact, Paul Vincent, he was the skills coach during that time, has gone with Rick Westhead on record and has provided, from what Rick Westhead calls, he's had a lot of off-the-record conversations, a very detailed synopsis of what happened in the events and leading up to where the executive team was made aware of this. And from what Rick Westhead tells us, is that a lot of what Paul Vincent has said on the record corroborates with a lot of what some of the Blackhawks staff or some of the other people that he said he spoke to. It matches what they tell him. So it's interesting. Again, the Blackhawks have up to this point have been very, very quiet about it. The NHL has been very quiet about it. They've kind of brushed it to the side, for lack of a better phrase. So it's interesting. So there's a law firm that's in charge of the investigation. They have said that they will make all their findings public when it is safe to do so, or when they've concluded the investigation, I should say. But that, in a very general sense, that's where we stand with the situation. Yeah.
There's also a piece about settlements too that we have to touch on as well too. But I think when I go back, and the Athletic did a great job, Mark Lazarus and Scott Powers did I believe it's Scott Powers. Mm-hmm. Scott Powers. Every time I read Scott Powers, I think of Colorado College. But the term that was used in the article that I thought was actually a really good representation of this is tone deaf. And I think that the NHL has long had a history, especially in these moments, of being tone deaf to these situations. And one of the things that was mentioned in the article that I think really stood out to me, and it shouldn't have, because we've seen this process play out quite a bit when it comes to a lot of these things. And the quote comes from someone in the article, and it says, "You might see a public outcry, but when the corporate partner and pocketbook is impacted in a significant way, that's historically when you see organizations try to rise to make the best decisions." That's a painful thing to hear when you're talking about a multi-billion-dollar business, and a thing that, when we talk about hockey teams, especially original six teams, it's when you go around the hockey world, for those who aren't familiar with it, there is a lifeline and a bloodline that runs through these teams. It's, and Vegas will get there at some point, should they be around for the next 50, 60, 70 years, where they're going to have hardcore fans that have been, second, third generation Vegas fans. They grew up with the team, that sort of thing. We're already at that point in fourth or fifth generation for a lot of Chicago Blackhawks fans, or people who have jumped in onto that. And it is more than just a business. It is more than just a local coffee shop where you buy your donuts and you enjoy them. There is real family history that is tied to this. And I know it sounds like an odd tangent to talk about this, but you are accountable to, as a business, to the people that you, for lack of a better term, represent. And you do, as an organization, the Chicago Blackhawks represent not only Chicago Blackhawks fans, they represent the National Hockey League and the fans that the National Hockey League stands for. And we come from all diverse walks of life. And I think now the onus is on the Hawks, financially motivated or not, to do the right thing. We have been in that conservative medium for hockey for far too long. And let this be a lesson for future organizations that find allegations of these sorts of things. Katie Strang has done a fantastic job with a lot of other allegations that have gone on the National Hockey League and exposed those pieces of that. We have to be better as a hockey community. Reading this article through The Athletic, talking about a lot of season ticket holders who have been through the Hawks through thick and thin, and they said this was the final straw. They're like, we've seen bad hockey decisions. We've seen a lot of ups, 3 Stanley Cups in the past decade or so. Nick, my question to you is this. If you're Chicago, you have to face these allegations head on, but what do you do as an organization to make this right? Besides making the findings public, what is their next step, and what is the overarching lesson as we move forward for the National Hockey League?
So a couple of things. You're absolutely right about how, any company, when you're cemented into Chicago and Minneapolis, why not? You are serving that community as well, right? So you do have an obligation to do what many of us would claim is the moral right thing to do, right? However, in these situations, that's not how these things go, and nor is it the way it should go. And here's why I say that. The Blackhawks, when you're under an investigation, and mind you, what I left out was, so the Blackhawks are being sued by the former player and have attached the high school hockey player that was assaulted in Houghton, Michigan, as part of this lawsuit. He's not a plaintiff. He's just in as a figure in to the lawsuit. From the reporting that, again, Rick Westhead has been so great at these last couple of weeks. Both these players have trouble sleeping. The Blackhawks player alleges that, the Blackhawks had basically said it was essentially his own fault that he got sexually assaulted. So very much like victim blaming. But the one thing you do when you're under investigation, whether it's a sports team or whether it's a company, you don't put yourself on the guillotine either, right? You have, essentially what the Blackhawks are doing is what any legal counsel will tell you to do. It is, this looks bad, but let's get somebody else involved. And once we make official findings of the facts, that's when you address them. So for folks who are wondering why Chicago, why the National Hockey League has been so quiet, that is why. You don't shoot yourself in the foot, before, anything else. Before you walk up to the hangman's noose. Yeah. Correct. Exactly. So I get it. Now, it rubs certain people the wrong way because, again, what Rick Westhead's reporting, there's a lot of specifics. There's people that have put their name to that. However, this has still not been independently proven or corroborated in a public stance. As I mentioned before, Paul Vincent, a former skills coach, has made these statements. However, they have not been verified. Again, what sucks in these situations, is that you have people that will talk, but they won't go on record. And this is, very common in the sexual abuse world, where you have folks that, they want to feel a sense of, I've been heard. They want to have a sense that, this has been dealt with, but they don't want to put their name to this. They don't want to be in the public eye of this. It's still it's a very, for lack of a better term, it's an embarrassing thing to be a part of in their mind. And mind you, that's not my words. That's a lot of what sexual abuse experts will touch on. Is that's the phrase victims feel, is that they feel embarrassed about being involved in a situation like this, and oftentimes that's what causes them to not talk on record. It's and now you have these claims by folks that go uncorroborated, and that does sometimes hurt the way these things move forward. So you kind of hope that, as this investigation goes, and again, it was an independent, or I should say is an independent law firm that is doing the investigation. I'm trying to get the name of that organization up because it is a local Chicago firm. I just closed the article too. But at the end of it, we're not going to know or hear anything from either Chicago or the National Hockey League until this independent law firm does complete their findings. And as they say, they have said that they won't be made public. You know damn well as I do that both the National Hockey League and the Chicago Blackhawks are going to get first looks at this before it's, there's public statements made. So you kind of wonder, based on what they find, what they will address, what part they will make public. Will there be, information that's redacted or kept private? I would imagine there probably would be in this situation. So, there's an investigation, but how much are we going to learn? How much are they going to make public? That's going to be, I think, the biggest question facing what's next in this investigation is, what do they find? Do they make any conclusions, right? Do they actually go out there and say, hey, we've gotten text messages, we've gotten this, and yeah, everybody knew? Or are they going to take the impeachment kind of stance as well? Like, if maybe this happened or maybe they knew, are they going to be that conclusive with their findings, or are they going to pose it as this may have occurred, right? Are they going to be that forthcoming about, their findings? It's still a big piece of the puzzle is still yet to be filled. And it's going to be very curious as to what they release and what they find out.
Yeah, Jenner and Block is the law firm that's doing that independent review. The other question that I had for you, and we had kind of read and touched on this a little bit, the settlement portion of this, as we kind of reverse back to that. Can you kind of walk people through, the piece of that as well too, and how this fits into that, and why, I guess, if you believe that the allegations are true, why the settlement option, wasn't something that stayed on the table for the Chicago Blackhawks?
Sure. So first, let's set up one thing, and this is now kind of common legal knowledge, right? And that is, in a sexual assault type situation, right? The remedy for that is money. That has been the standard now. Is, you're not going to be able to, there's not really wounds you can heal. For the mental side, there are victims, unfortunately, who just, they never get over it. But, there's definitely therapies and different things that they can do. But essentially, from the legal system, they said that the only recourse that shows that there's something that was done was, money. Now, for, the settlement option, Noah, you can look at it a couple of different ways, right? So a settlement basically says to some folks, okay, I'm accusing you of this. We can either take this to court, or we can come to agreement on money. We can move on with it. There are some folks who are on the receiving end of any allegations, right, that would think that by settling, that the public perception of that might be admitting guilt or would be endorsing said allegations against you. And there's no question that the National Hockey League and the Chicago Blackhawks were probably, in tandem in that decision, would be my guess. Because, again, with the league being involved, they know that their reputation is at stake here too, right? They don't want a company underneath their umbrella like the Blackhawks to be involved in a situation like this, or to give the wrong public impression, right? Because here we are, the public perception of how this has been handled so far has not been very positive from both the league as well as the Blackhawks standpoint. So there still will be a settlement to this, I believe. The question is it going to be one of those where both sides come to an agreement, or is it going to be where a judge is involved, we're in court, and it's a judge awarding damages to the victims, right? So it's interesting because, again, every situation is unique when it comes to these types of things. But again, when you have allegations of this magnitude, I think still, it could be where this is where my lack of the legal system is getting to me. I'm not sure if, these settlements are made public, and then eventually you're back to square one like we are in today, where it's still now in the public eye. You're still having to explain yourself and, well, why'd you settle for this? And I think that's harder to explain that way versus going through the process. I know some folks would look at it as you're kind of dragging it out, but again, when you're made accusations of this and there's been wrongdoings, I think anybody, again, like we said before, you don't want to shoot yourself before you go into the noose. So, you want to, you want to be convicted first before you accept your punishment.
Yeah. And you wonder, again, with the findings, you wonder how far to the top it goes and how far it's going to extend. Is Stan Bowman, going to be a big piece of this? Is Mark Bergevin in Montreal going to be a big piece of this? You never really know. My last question for you here, Nick, as we kind of circle back through that, regarding the National Hockey League, kind of the hockey world in general. We mentioned hockey culture in the beginning. The hockey world, especially in recent years, is no secret to things like this. One of the most well-known documented pieces in the junior world, Theo Fleury, Shelton Kennedy, guys like that. You read Theo's books, very good, very harrowing, but very, very good pieces of literature to sit down and read. For the hockey world, and again, every time something happens, we hope that we're better the next time, right? But it seems like the hockey world has been spinning its wheels a little bit when it comes to things like this. What lessons does the hockey world take from this, from the National Hockey League all the way down to any youth development program? And where do we go from here? What is the next step? Obviously, the step is to be better, but how do we go about accomplishing that? If even at the youth level, if a multi-billion-dollar industry can't find a handle on something like this?
So I think there's two ways to look at a situation like this, right? There is those that say, okay, now that this has happened, is there a way to prevent it? I look at it both from that perspective, and more so, I think what has angered a lot of the fans that are out there, especially Chicago Blackhawks fans, hockey fans, and certainly the National Hockey League isn't happy with this either, is you really can't sit here and tell me that you can prevent everything. But what you can do is have a system in place to properly handle it, right? Yeah. I think the big part of this story is, it's horrible what happened in the Chicago organization, but more so because of the way it was allegedly handled, this Brad Aldrich gentleman was given another opportunity to be put in a position to do continued harm, after this incident. And that's where we're at, right? And that's why this story is so high profile. It's not once, but twice. Like in Miami University, nothing specific as far as we know of specific allegations, but allegations. But then in Houghton, Michigan, where this former high school hockey player, that's very specific of what detail that happened. So and you mentioned the Miami piece too, just quick for people who are wondering, when we say 4 months, it was 3 months in the summer and one game weekend. Yeah. It was only that too. And the other piece I wanted to quick throw in there too, is we're at that point where not only do we need that system in place, but we need repercussions should that system be broken that match the punishment, because we see so often where people aren't following mandatory reporting, for example, and they get a slap on the wrist, and it has to be something more than that. But anyway, continue. But that's, I think why this story is as big as it is there was the way that, it was internally handled. Again, as Rick Westhead alleges, victim blaming, supposedly members on the top brass. His reporting suggests that they were absolutely told about it, and it was recommended they go to the Chicago Sex Crimes Unit to get the proper authorities involved. And it was denied. It was like, nope, we're not going to do it. So what they did instead was, instead of containing what a gentleman that had shown, to be doing horrendous acts upon other people, not only did they fail there, but then they also failed by giving him a positive letter of recommendation. Now, to be fair, I want to make sure I'm clear on this. I know Rick Westhead has filed a Freedom of Information Act to Miami of Ohio University, and he's gotten the personnel file of Aldrich, and he's trying to file another one to try to find this letter. So far, he hasn't heard back from Miami University, because it'd be curious to see if they did find out what was said in that letter, right? And the idea is Chicago failed twice. They failed internally, but then they also failed to protect other communities from this gentleman by putting him in a spot or giving him what could be an opportunity to continue harm. Now, let's make sure we play both sides of the coin, right? So Chicago obviously is denying any and all that's being alleged. They also say that they didn't have to report anything because they were not under the age of 18, that it wasn't a vulnerable adult or somebody that was disabled, so they didn't have an obligation to do so. And number two, they're also saying that well, if this letter does exist, that doesn't hold us accountable to what Brad did in another organization. So they're saying, okay, well, even if we did send out a letter, right, that doesn't bear us responsible for what he did somewhere else, essentially. So, and is
that in your eyes, is that a factual statement? Because I mean, I think in its basis, that's technically correct. But again, you allowed the items that were essentially, I don't want to say premeditated, but it had already occurred, knowing the history of somebody.
Sure. So there's three ways you can look at that, right? So if we, let's just say whatever Rick Westhead is reporting, let's just assume that it's all been proven correct, that Stan Bowman knew of this, that upper execs knew of it, that they denied getting the proper authorities involved. And then this former video coach goes on to do more terrible things. The judge could look at it and say, well, listen, had we had been involved, he never gets the opportunity to get to Ohio and then over to Michigan. On the flip side, technically Chicago isn't wrong there. I don't know how you can directly link a positive review to it's essentially just a recommendation of just based on his video skills coach.
They're technically two unrelated things as far as a job recommendation versus personal conduct in right. Some sense. Yeah.
And that's essentially what Chicago is trying to establish, that there's the job and then there's, the person, right? And it's not our responsibility what the person does. But a judge could also look at that and say, well, wait a second here. No, you knew of these horrible allegations that happened with inside your own. Not only did you deny proper services, but from what we're hearing, there's victim blaming inside the organization. So not only did you cry foul to the victim and blame the victim for what had happened, you did not take the proper channels under Illinois law or Chicago city code, however you want to phrase it, right, to handle this situation. So by not doing so, the judge could say you perpetuated him to stay on your staff, which then led to Brad either himself wanting out. It's still not clear whether Brad chose to leave or whether Chicago said, get him out of here, right? But either way, you provide a positive review that a judge could look at that and say, well, that also could be an endorsement of the person too, because if someone could be a great coach and great, but if someone's part of the French, a butthole, I don't think you're making that same recommendation. So it depends on how you look at it. It could go both ways. Again, while this has to wait until, and again, we don't know what's going to be revealed with this internal investigation. That's going to give us a pretty good idea, I think. And there's no question to me this will eventually find its way into Illinois court to finish it. And it's probably going to get nasty, considering what we've learned so far. And if indeed all that, what has been reported is found out to be true.
Yeah, it's tough. I think Chicago in general, I think they're going to have a decent team this year and a lot for those fans to be excited about otherwise with the Onyx product. So it's kind of difficult in that piece. I think if I got to be honest, and this might be oversimplified, but my biggest takeaway from this is do the right thing. Especially as we go through this, if you're a mandatory reporter, if things like this happen, even if, for example, you hear something about it and it turns out to not be true, especially if you're a mandatory reporter, there's a reason the word mandatory is in front of it. Do your job, do what you have to do, pass it on to the proper authorities. We saw the same thing in Pittsburgh, potentially with Bill Guerin in that situation too. And all the confusion that comes through it. If you follow the proper channels and do what you're supposed to do, the judicial system and the investigative services provided will do the rest, because if not, you might wait 10 or 15 years, but you might still have investigative services that come in, but now you're at fault instead of you doing what you were supposed to do as personnel and as an organization. So Nick, you had one more point to add there, I saw.
Well, and just like you said, do the right thing. That's how, again, you can never prevent everything from happening. You can certainly have procedures and different things and screenings, but it's still not going to prevent everything. But again, you can look at this from, a fan's perspective and look at the Blackhawks and you can say, hey, this probably wasn't handled very well. Had you had handled it properly, maybe we're not talking about a player in Houghton, Michigan or Miami University's, an NCAC partner for St. Cloud, talking about, them being dragged into this, right? And it goes to show you that what oftentimes when things like this happen, Noah, yeah, there's a shock. If I'm a manager or a CEO of a company, I'm learning this. That's no question. Nobody wants to deal with these sort of things. It's emotional. You're trying to how do I best do my damage control with PR. But I think one thing that I think Chicago and this whole situation is teaching us is by sweeping under the rug or not, it's going to end up being 10 times worse of a look for you, because at some point it's going to still rear its ugly head out of the sand at some point, and you're going to look like, again, as alleged, the story alleges that you tried to hide this, and you did, and then because you did that, supposedly maybe this presented opportunities for this man to continue to abuse other people. Yeah. So and that's the takeaway.
And people make mistakes too. Organizations make mistakes too. It's all about, again, how do you respond? It goes back to the James Blue situation. This happened. What is the next step? You can't take it back. One of the examples that I thought was a really good representation of this is actually comes out of the Toronto camp, the Toronto Maple Leafs, right? They hired who is it? Dusty Emu in their organization as the Marlies goaltending coach. And he lasted about 2 days until there was kind of a red light about his social media activity and his non-inclusion of people and the environment in which Toronto wanted to create, and things from his social media account, which is no longer active. And that's obviously a scaled down representation of what we're talking about. But again, it goes along the same lines as, organizations sometimes, they miss things, or maybe, want to make sure that their facts are correct when things are happening. But at the same time, there are certain levels of severity of actions, even alleged, for people in which an organization and a group has responsibility to pass on to the proper authorities. And I think that's the piece that we have to take out, because again, as we went through, if a multi-billion-dollar organization can't do it, then who's to say a peewee group in the middle of Oklahoma is going to be able to handle it any better if we can't even do it at the highest levels of sport. So, I guess that's my other takeaway too, is we've got to find a way to, for lack of a better term, be an example at the highest level so that we can pass down how we should actually handle these things within our own local communities. Because as we know, it gets even messier and messier, I think, sometimes as we go through that too.
And one final point, Noah, is I think we've hit the story pretty well.
Yes.
And covered it to what we know and what we, what maybe is the next steps in the process here. But again, the mandatory reporting aspect, for folks to, I get it, and I think you said it really well. Even if it's alleged, still report it, because at the end of the day, it's rare, but let's just say it is wrong. Right. But that's what the investigators are there for, to determine whether something actually happened or not. The thing is, by missing something that ends up being true, this is a situation where now we're possibly looking at with Chicago, where something was either missed or mismanaged, and it caused, a ripple effect of more harm that possibly could have been prevented. So,
and provided a victim isn't totally lying, which I do have a personal opinion on that too. There's something to be said for victims who are just making up a story to try to oust someone. And that's another piece of that too. But,
but that's why you report it still.
Right. And like you said, most of the situations do end up where there's something, even if there's not something formally or legally wrong, there was something that made somebody else uncomfortable or something that they noticed. And I think, on the lighter surface of anything, even having something like that go through maybe might make somebody realize that maybe their actions weren't the most appropriate, or things made somebody uncomfortable. They might be really upset about that. It might end in a hostile workplace where you have to separate those things, but at least there was something exposed there where two people had a disagreement or something was not comfortable between the two. And that was reported. And that's what it goes down to is, everybody deserves the right to have equal rights, be able to go to work and feel comfortable, be able to do what they have to do in life and not feel threatened or worried or things like that. It doesn't matter if you get paid millions of dollars at the highest level of sport, or if you're, picking up trash for community service at the side of the road. You have to be
doing a Sunday morning podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. So Nick, are we good? Do we have anything else to add on that?
No, I think, obviously we'll track this one too.
Yep.
There's, these things you never feel good about reporting these, but I think it is important to share these situations because again, by bringing out, awareness of what maybe has happened. And again, none of this do we know has been proven true, but pretty big allegations there. No, I mean, just hope that, whether it's somebody else has been a victim and this gives them the confidence to speak up about it, or for organizations that for those who maybe encounter this, that, it shows you that there's a right and a wrong way to handle this. And you kind of hope by explaining through it that, they make the right decision and hopefully not, you hope you never have to deal with it. But if it does, then, you can take maybe a piece from this and handle it the right way.
Yeah. And this is the first time that we've talked about things like this on the show. And granted, it is the middle of August, but nonetheless, we're a podcast that covers St. Cloud State and Minnesota hockey. So, if we're talking about this, take note of that situation because it is something that is overarching for all of us and the piece. I mean, we've seen plenty of even Title IX investigations at universities as well, too. That's just been really difficult for, people to go through. But, you have to make sure that you're doing the right thing. With that being said, Nick, I think that's going to do it for episode number 74 here of our Sunday show. Like we mentioned, working on a guest potentially for this week, but you never know how those things go. Who knows, Nick? Maybe we'll take another week off before school starts. I have no idea. We'll have to see as we move forward. But we'll keep you updated. We'll keep you posted. If you don't see an episode, I would say by Friday morning, it's probably not happening. Let's be realistic. So, but we'll try to keep you up to date as best as we can. And that will do it. For Nick Maxon, I'm Noah Grant, and we will see you next week in the Den.
One-timer coming, they score! Ripped in! A bomb from Perix!
So Dana Rasmussen fires and she scores! Dana Rasmussen for the Huskies alongside
Kaprizov in for a chance to win it. He scores! Kirill the Thrill is for real. Welcome to the NHL. A game winner.
St. Cloud Cathedral is now 42.6 seconds away from wrapping up the school's first ever title.